All right. Hello, everybody. This is the NBA Tournament Strategy Show, where we do a quick look back at yesterday's slate, see what went well, see what might not have gone as well. And then we will look at today's slate, look at guys that we want exposure to, make sure that we are on the right side of research. And then we'll also talk about potential leverage plays. And then later today on the pre-lock show, that will be at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. That is when we will work on the implementation of what we will be doing on this slate, leverage plays, guys that we'll cap exposure to, and go from there. Let's look back at yesterday's crazy 3-game slate. This was the 100K winning lineup last night. There's a few surprises on here, but I think the vast majority of it ends up making sense. The one and only SGA was out for the Oklahoma City Thunder yesterday, and everybody knew that meant that we needed to load up on the Thunder. There were a lot of different ways that you could go. Jalen Williams ended up being one of my favorite Thunder to have exposure to, so that was nice. Josh Giddey was a core play. Trey Mann I had a lot of exposure to as well, so all of that made sense. Denny Avdija, it was his birthday. We talked about it on this show. For me, I personally had a rule where I wasn't planning on having Avdija in lineups unless Bradley Beal ended up being out. Unfortunately, we got the news that Bradley Beal was going to play, and I, of course, had leverage on Bradley Beal. That was painful because he got hurt, and of course, Denny Avdija had a solid game. Giannis Antetokounmpo was a core play, so that worked out pretty well. Brook Lopez was a leverage play yesterday on the pre-lock show, so if you watched that, that worked out. Malcolm Brogdon, I was not on him at all. He smashed. Bobby Portis, I was also not on him, but he did make more sense with Jrue Holiday not starting. So we talk about that sometimes when we find out Jrue Holiday's out. Portis sometimes has ceiling performances there. With Jrue having limited minutes and not starting, the Bobby Portis play made a lot more sense. Anyway, who cares about yesterday now? Razzle, no pants show. I don't know how you knew that, but nice job, man. Ricky G said Bill killed my lineups. I was so pissed. Yeah, I mean, I had 20% Bill, and he was killing it at first, so I was feeling good. But of course, like as the slate went on, like it definitely was a bit more painful. But 20%, didn't crush my lines. But I still wasn't profitable yesterday, but is what it is. Thomas said, "Sup, Josiah, good to see you, man. How's it going? We are having a snow day over here. A couple of inches have fallen already. Awesome, man. I mean, well, that might not be awesome for you, but it's awesome for me because in the South, we don't get too much snow. It's a rainy, dreary day for me, so I'm trying to stay awake. Kaboom, always good to see you, man. Thomas said, "What's up? Bad night, but ready to bounce back." Exactly. For me, it was not a great night, but on 3-game slates, like I've had some really big wins, like huge, and then I've had some awful nights where I lose everything. So that wasn't the case last night in either direction. So for me, I was just like, okay, it wasn't a positive night, but at least it wasn't brutal. Like I didn't empty my bank account. All right, guys, we have a gigantic slate on deck. So let's go ahead and start breaking into this. Starting off, we have the Memphis Grizzlies against the Charlotte Hornets. Guys, we have a long list of questionables here. For the Grizzlies, Desmond Bane appears to be healthy, so that's good. Brandon Clark is out. That's important. Zaire Williamson's questionable. Santi Aldama's questionable. Danny Green has been out for a while. The reason why Brandon Clark being out is important is because everyone and their mom is playing Steven Adams tonight, and it's because the Hornets are absolutely awful at defending against bigs. We've been playing bigs against the Hornets all year. Steven Adams has been having some strong performances as of late. And so with Brandon Clark being out, Adams' minutes are more consistent. If Clark was playing, I would be tempted to fade Steven Adams here. But he just makes too much sense for me to not fade him. He's going to be a popular play, Steven Adams, on this slate, and for good reason, in my opinion. Of course, Ja Morant, you can play everyone against the Hornets. They are bad at defending every position. Jaren Jackson Jr. is also viable in this slate. I think he's an interesting pivot off of Steven Adams potentially. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into that to see if it actually makes sense given their price tags, but I kind of like that spot. And then, of course, Ja Morant's viable as well. He's less interesting with everyone healthy, but he's still interesting leverage play depending on where your ownership ends up. So game that we really want to focus on. Oh yeah, for the Hornets, Gordon Hayward's doubtful. That's pretty big. Martin's questionable. Kelly Oubre's out. So some important injuries for the Hornets. I think we can definitely go back to LaMelo Ball here. I think he's viable on this slate. Outside of Ball, um, we've seen Jalen McDaniels, Plumlee, PJ Washington have some solid games. They can stay in the player pool, but they're not really guys I'm too excited to play. I think it's mostly LaMelo here and maybe like a few shots on Terry Rozier, depending on ownership. Like single-digit ownership on Rozier or Ball would make them more interesting as leverage plays for me on this slate. Now, the news that we are all excited and waiting to see is this Cleveland Cavaliers news. We have Darius Garland listed as doubtful. We saw what happened last time he was out. That game had a major impact on Donovan Mitchell's performance. Evan Mobley's questionable. That would have a huge impact on Donovan Mitchell. I'm glad. I don't know if you guys have watched any sports content today, but I'm glad that a lot of the sports channels are going back to Monday just because on Tuesday, people weren't really able to focus on Donovan Mitchell due to like the big tragedy that happened in the NFL world. But today, people are talking about Donovan Mitchell's really big 71-point performance on Monday. So that was nice to see because, got overlooked for good reason. But this is another potential smash spot for Donovan Mitchell. The matchup against the Suns makes me a little nervous just because they're known for having a solid defense. But actually, over the last few games, the Phoenix Suns have been one of the worst defensive teams as a whole. So this could be a spot where we can target a lot of Cavaliers. Again, I don't think this is going to be a sneaky spot, especially with Garland out. We were on the Donovan Mitchell train early last time around. I don't think we're going to have a low-owned Mitchell here. If Evan Mobley's questionable, I know this didn't work out last time, but a sneaky potential leverage play could be Jared Allen if Mobley's out. I would love to see the ownership on him because I think that could be a fun spot to target for us on this slate. And then, of course, the Kevin Love play. Like, if he starts, he crushed last time out. At 5,700, it makes sense if Mobley's out. And if he starts, if that's not the case, then I don't care to play Kevin Love. On the other side of this, the Phoenix Suns, Devin Booker, Cam Johnson, both are still out. Everyone's priced pretty appropriately at this point. Of course, still DeAndre Ayton's the main guy who benefits the most from a usage standpoint. So I would potentially be open to playing Ayton. I don't love the matchup against the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's tough. I would feel a little bit better about it if Evan Mobley ended up being out. And hopefully they try to attack Kevin Love because that's a lot easier than trying to attack Jared Allen. All right, guys, moving on. Another game with some really big injury news. We have the Oklahoma City Thunder against the Orlando Magic. So these first three games of the slate are all massive games. So it's going to be really hard because I know some people like to try and fade the first few games and focus on the later games. It's going to be really hard to do that on this slate. With that being said, though, the later games are going to have dramatically much lower ownership than they typically do. So hopefully we can try to find some spots there. All right. So for the Thunder, we have SGA listed as TBD. We saw how big of a deal it is when this guy is off the court. So that news is massive. On the other side of things, Poku's still out, DeYang's still out, Jeremiah Robinson Earl's still out. So we know that the guys who benefit the most if SGA is out is Lou Dort, Josh Giddey, Jalen Williams sees a nice boost in usage as well. So definitely a team that I want to have a lot of exposure to. We can also take shots on Isaiah Joe once again and Trey Mann are all going to be viable plays on the slate if SGA is out. On the other side of this game, the injury news is wild once again. Franz Wagner's out, suspension. Bol Bol is out for health protocols. Mo Wagner is out for suspension. Admiral Schofield is out. Kevin Harris is out. Suggs, Okeke, Isaac is out as well. So the Orlando Magic are missing a lot of guys. In particular, when it comes to the front court, they're short with guys like Bol out. So let's see. So the guys who are really going to pop the most for us here are Wendell Carter Jr. He has a nice, safer minutes floor with them missing guys. Mo Bamba should also see a slight increase in minutes here too. Cole Anthony is more viable on this slate just due to all the guys that they have out. So that's why we should have some natural exposure to him. This is another spot where you have two bad teams facing off against each other. And so I mention this all the time. Sometimes you can get some DFS gold in these spots, but it's risky because sometimes it can just get really gross and ugly. Especially the SGA plays. Wouldn't shock me if there's a little bit of a blowout here, but the spread's pretty close. And so I think most of us are assuming SGA is going to be out tonight. So interesting spot for sure. Next up, we have the 76ers against the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers have Chris Duarte listed as questionable. Daniel Tease is out. He's been out for a while. The 76ers are completely healthy. Not something we see very often. Embiid had a big game on Monday. I like playing bigs against the Pacers. It's a strategy that's worked out pretty well so far this season. I don't know if this is a spot that I'm trying to pick on Embiid, though, at 11,200. It's a spot that I want to dig deeper into. Nice. Ricky G, thank you for this. Apparently, Underdog just tweeted that Embiid is questionable. I do see the questionable tag on the DS, which is nice that we updated that. That makes me even less likely to want to play Embiid. It makes me be at peace about that a little bit. Yeah, I think we can avoid it. Tyrese Maxey's also starting to see an increase in minutes slowly but surely. He played 26 minutes on Monday, which is nice. He's still coming off the bench. As soon as he starting again, I would be less interested in James Harden. If he comes off the bench, I think James Harden is still viable. Of course, if Embiid's out, then Harden's going to be in a smash spot. I feel like we dealt with this on Monday too, where Embiid was questionable the entire slate. And so we all forgot about Embiid and we were all prepping to play a ton of Harden. And then Embiid played and then we forgot about Embiid and then we just didn't play Harden at all. So just in case that plays out again, let's just remember that Embiid's still viable on this slate. If he plays. Anyone else? I think we're good on the Sixers. On the Pacers side of things, Tyrese Halliburton has not been that guy. I haven't been taking as many shots on him as of late, I don't believe. And so not really trying to start now. I love playing Miles Turner, but I don't love the matchup here. If Duarte ends up being out, then I'm fine taking shots on guys like Nesmith, Mathurin, Heel, Nimbard. But again, I don't love the spot, so I'm really not planning on forcing it unless something just really stands out to me as we do research later today. Next up, we have a game with the largest spread, the Spurs against the Knicks. For those of you that don't know, the Spurs are a god-awful defense. There is some important news here. We have Devin Vassell listed as questionable. We know for the most part at this point, when Devin Vassell's out, then we increase exposure to guys like Keldon Johnson and Trey Jones. So interesting spot potentially, but the Knicks have a pretty good defense, so not one I want to pick on too much, so still wouldn't be a spot that I love, but viable play for sure. The hard part about these Knicks guys is that there's not really any important news when it comes to injuries. Like Derrick Rose is questionable, Obi Toppin's doubtful, but that doesn't really matter too much. I worry about the blowout here. I do. Randall is not cheap anymore at 10,500. Brunson 7K. The matchup's gold. If these guys are low owned due to the blowout concern, of course I'll take some shots here, but not my favorite spot. Because I really am actually concerned about the blowout here. I don't know how the Spurs can keep it close. Sean said Philly number 2 in points allowed and number 2 in defensive rating. I'll pass on the Pacers. Yeah, I'm just not a fan of attacking against teams like Philly or Boston. It rarely works out. I'm usually okay with like one off. Like we've seen Tyrese Halliburton beat really good defenses like Miami and have a ceiling performance. So I'm okay with one-offs like that, but not something I'm trying to force too much exposure to on this massive slate. Next up, we have the Bucks against the Toronto Raptors. The Bucks, George Hill's TBD, so we'll see if he plays or not. Chris Middleton's out still, so no surprises there. The Raptors are also relatively healthy. They have Otto Porter out, and that's pretty much it. These are two solid defenses as well. I mentioned it last time around. Pascal Siakam has had ceiling performances before in the past against Giannis. He's a viable play, but still not a matchup I like to pick on too much. Fred VanVleet is still viable. You can shoot threes against this Bucks team. This is a back-to-back for the Bucks, so there could be some weird injury news, but I'm not expecting it. As long as Drew Holiday plays, I'm not super interested in Bobby Portis. Yeah, I'm not really super interested in this game environment. Of course, Giannis is going to pop a ton on this slate. He's fine. If I'm going to let the nomination station decide how much exposure I have to him once I put in my leverage plays, I'm probably just going to see how much I have naturally after that. Ricky G, yes, Middleton is still out, which is why Giannis and Drew are always going to be viable, as long as that's the case. Next up, we have the Bulls against the Brooklyn Nets. For the Nets, we have Royce O'Neal listed as probable, Markieff Morris listed as probable. For the Bulls, we have Andre Drummond listed as probable, and Javonte Green listed as out for Tony Bradley and Lonzo Ball. Not a lot of injury news in this game either. It's weird. The NBA, a lot of these teams are healthy right now, and it's a surreal experience just because we've been attacking these injuries for so long. And I think you're seeing why so much of the focus is going to be on those first three games, because the rest of these games are just fine. Again, like none of these guys are really standing out too much. Both of these teams are fine defensively as of late. No one particular spot. I'm fine taking shots and one-offs on these guys, but no one's really shining too much. TJ Warren, of course, has been in solid form as of late. But again, with this team being healthy, I don't like taking shots on Warren as much, or any of the role players. The Nets have really started to solidify their team from being a laughingstock to now being actual contenders. So they have a lot of options, and those are teams I don't love to target when it comes to DFS. One-offs are fine, but not fun to try and get multiple pieces of a team like that. Next up, we have the Pelicans against the Rockets. The Rockets are relatively healthy. Only Jayshawn Tate's out. The Pelicans have Larry Nance Jr. out. Zion Williamson's out, and he'll be out for a good chunk of time. And Brandon Ingram will be out. So this is a game that is interesting to me. The Pelicans are in an interesting spot with their injuries. With Larry Nance Jr. out, Joe Val automatically becomes a safer play when it comes to his minutes. With Zion Williamson out, I always like Joe Val a little bit more as well. So I don't know how popular he'll be on this slate, but I love the matchup against the Rockets. Very soft in the front court when it comes to rebounding and just defensively. So I love this spot for Joe Val. It doesn't look like he's popping too much in the domination station, but especially if he's low owned, he could be a potential leverage play for me. Along those same lines, CJ McCollum is in a massive usage spot when guys like Zion and Ingram are out. I talked about this similar situation with Booker when Chris Paul was out. It's very rare that we pay 8, 9K for guys that are going to have a massive usage rate. Like CJ McCollum's usage rate is 31.5% when Ingram and Zion are out. It's very rare that we are paying only 8 or 9K on a guy like that. Usually we're paying 9, 10, 11K for guys who are hitting the 30% range in usage. So he's way too cheap, and I love the spot. So if he's going to be low owned too, potential leverage spot for me as well. Outside of that, no one's really popping up too much for me. I know KJ Martin and Eason are always guys that usually kind of pop up in the lines. I don't plan on having too much exposure to them. The other guy that I always forget about is Trey Murphy, the third. I'm a fan of his, but he also just performs well when Zion's out, and so he should have a safer minutes floor here. And also, another guy I plan on having increased exposure to. So I like the Pelicans a good bit. The Rockets, I never have too much exposure to them, especially in a tougher matchup against the Pelicans. I'm not like Xing them out of my player pool. If the domination station gives me exposure to them naturally, that's fine. Next up, we have the Trailblazers against the Timberwolves. Let's see. Injury news. Nurkic is probable. People who somehow predicted Nurkic not finishing out that last game and playing Eubanks, that was a great call, I guess. But Nurkic is probable, so he should be playing, which means I'm not planning on having exposure to Eubanks. On the other side of this, we have, still with the Trailblazers, we have Gary Payton Jr. listed as questionable. Justice Winslow is out. Nasir Little's out. Nothing too crazy there. For the Timberwolves, D'Angelo Russell's not on the injury report, so he appears to be healthy. Naz Reid is questionable. That's pretty big. Torrance Prince is questionable. And then McLaughlin and Cat are still out. So for me, I don't love this game, oddly enough. It does look like Nurkic has had strong performances against the Timberwolves so far this season, even with Rudy Gobert being available. So it seems like he has done well in this spot. So as long as his ownership isn't too crazy, I'm fine having some exposure, but still not my favorite position. Oddly enough, I don't love this spot for Damian Lillard. I usually would, but unless something pops off for me later, like I feel like this is a little bit of a softer matchup, just not my favorite position for them. The Trailblazers have been a better team defensively this season, and then of course the addition of Gary Payton will only make that better. So yeah, like ultimately, guys, I'm just not really a big fan. I kind of hope that changes because I do want some exposure to that game, just because Lillard and Edwards and Russell, those guys can break slates, but I can't find a good case for it, at least not right now. Next up, we have the Golden State Warriors against the Detroit Pistons. The Warriors, they still have Wiggins out, Kuminga out, Andre Iguodala is out, James Wiseman's out, JaMychal Green and Steph are out. We've seen this situation enough. I am still going to keep loading up on Jordan Poole. He's still too cheap for me. Similar story to CJ McCollum. High usage rate with these guys out, and he's just too cheap for the upside he brings. I think you can make a similar case for Klay Thompson. Solid spot for him as well, but he's a little bit more streaky for me. We'll see. I'll probably have a preference in regards to potential leverage plays, assuming and hoping these guys aren't too popular, but it's very TBD for me. I think Draymond's also viable here. I just like attacking the Pistons. They're not the best defensive team. I'm okay with them. No one's going to pop too hard here, so I think we can get some interesting leverage spots here. Kaboom, you're right. Bay has been in fantastic form as of late, especially when it comes, as well as Burks too. They both have been performing very, very well, especially with Bagley out. I think when Bagley's out, I'm more open to playing guys like Stewart, Bay, and Burks. I think we'll have exposure to them naturally just because of how cheap they are. Yeah, Sadiq Bey. Sadiq Bey. I knew who you were talking about. I knew Bey has one of those last names that stand out enough where I'm like, okay, I can put that together. Cool. So yeah, interesting game is going to go overlooked, and so that's why I'm interested in some pieces, just because it's going to be low owned. Like I said, these last few games, I think we can get some really solid plays here. Next up, we have the Miami Heat, where they have a long list per usual. Caleb Martin's probable, Gabe Vincent's probable, Duncan Robinson's questionable, Dwayne Dedman's questionable, Haslam is questionable, Jovic is out, Omer Yurtseven's out. For the Lakers, of course, the one and only LeBron James is questionable, per usual. Russell Westbrook is probable, Lonnie Walker is questionable, and then AD has been out for a while. Really hard to predict what we should do with the Lakers with LeBron James being questionable, but we know how to treat this team. If he's out, we pretty much load up on him. Tougher matchup for Thomas Bryant tonight, so I doubt I'll be going there. The Miami Heat are a strong defense, not a team that I like to pick on too much, But of course, if LeBron plays, he's viable, and I would want to have some exposure to him. If if LeBron's out, then Westbrook kind of moves in that spot for me as a potential leverage play. Can't forget about Bam Adebayo, right, guys? I know you guys hate him. But Bam Adebayo, I think, is very viable on this slate. We've been playing bigs against the Lakers all season long. I think a great spot for him. And I'm open. I don't like it, but I'm open to taking some shots on Jimmy Butler here against the Lakers too. I just Jimmy Butler doesn't ever really project too well, doesn't ever really pop too much, but in just certain spots he rises up a bit more. It just feels like a Jimmy Butler spot for me. Sorry, I don't have like stats or data to back that one up, but it's just a feel. Really like Thompson tonight, Thomas said. Is it a bad idea to make him a core? LOL. Let's wait and see ownership. I like to see ownership before trying to make guys cores, just because it impacts so much. Like, sometimes I can really like a guy, but I only need 20 or 30% of him to make him a core play because he's only going to be 5% owned. And that's like that kind of mindset helps me not ruin my night because yeah, of course, if I core a guy like Thompson and he goes off, then I'm feeling great, but you probably only need it like 30% to win a contest if no one else has them. So I just like to kind of wait and see. Kaboom said, love, love, love the hammer games always. No joke. Yeah, no, I tell you guys, I usually, after this show and when I start digging deeper into research around like 2 or 3 p.m., I start by looking at the last game and then moving forward because it's just, I love having exposure to those last games. They're just always under-owned. And on this slate, more so than normal, it should be the case. But yeah, LeBron James is an awesome spot. I like Jimmy Butler a little bit, and then Bam Adebayo is a little sneaky for me. I think that's it. A lot of injury news there, so we'll see how that actually lands. But Thomas, I do really like Klay Thompson. So if he does end up being a core play, it wouldn't shock me. But just, just don't want to force it yet. Atlanta Hawks at the Sacramento Kings. Let's see. Do we have injury news here? Clint Capella is still out, and then the Kings are healthy. That's a bit of a buzzkill for me. With these teams being pretty healthy, I'm still going to have some forced exposure, but I don't like taking shots on the Hawks guys, like when it comes like Trae Young or DeJounte Murray, unless someone's out. And similar story with guys like Collins and Hunter. I typically like to play them when I feel like there's a really good reason to. We got the John Collins call right on Monday, so I'll dig a little bit deeper into researching him to make sure we're not overlooking anything. I think Okongwu is definitely still going to be viable on this slate as well. And then Sabonis has been he didn't really perform that well last night, but we can attack this Hawks team. And so I think Sabonis is going to be in a great spot. It looks like we have some ownership on him, and he's not going to be sneaky. So we'll see. Outside of that, I don't love like the peripheral streaky shooter guys. So if they end up being popular tonight on this slate, I'm probably not going to get to them with them being healthy. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm doing on this slate, guys. Of course, we'll actually work on the implementation of what we're doing on the pre-lock show. That will, of course, be at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. Feel free to click the link in the description for the link to become a VIP member to be able to have access to that show. Chris said, nope, uncheck the Jimmy Butler box. Hey, I don't hate it, man. I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. I always say, like, if you have a bad feeling about a guy that night, like, I don't uncheck guys, but I don't tell people not to because sometimes it works out for me. There was like 2 or 3 slates ago, I saw TJ Warren popping and everyone was healthy. And I was just like, nope, not doing that today. Razzle said, who's tonight, Javion Carter? I need to ask you, man. You're the one who gets that call right. I need to ask you who's the guy. Kaboom said, let's get it, y'all. See you later. All right, guys. That's a good signing off point. Appreciate all of you guys for joining. Appreciate you all. Look forward to seeing you guys later on the pre-lock show at 5:30 p.m. Peace out. Have a good one. Bye.